My colleagues and I are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. At today's meeting, the committee raised the target range for the federal funds rate by a quarter percentage point, bringing the target range to 4.75% to 5%.
The Federal Reserve raised the target range for its big benchmark interest rates by 0.25% on Wednesday as it battles stubborn inflation and a banking crisis, which has pushed the central bank into taking its most significant emergency actions since the onset of the pandemic. The rate hike brings the Fed's policy rate, the federal funds rate, to a new range of 4.75% to 5%, the highest since October of 2007. In its statement, the Fed said inflation remains elevated and that the central bank remains highly attentive to inflation risk. While banking issues could cause credit conditions to tighten and weigh on economic growth, the US banking system is sound and resilient. Recent developments are likely to result in tighter credit conditions for households and businesses and to weigh on economic activity, hiring, and inflation. The extent of these effects is uncertain. Now they know what this can do. They absolutely know. They not uncertain, they real certain. They just not saying the quiet part out loud. And what the Feds is doing is hurting everyday people. The constant rate hikes do not address the real reason for why inflation is this high. It's out of control. And the real reason must be dealt with by this Congress and this president. It is corporate greed. That's what is keeping inflation high. Predominantly, it is corporate greed. And Dr. Robert Reich, once again, he hits the nail on the head. Let's put up what Dr. Robert Reich had to say in a tweet. Once again, interest rate hikes are going to fall hardest on low-wage workers and the poor, the same people who have already been hurt the most by rising prices. Higher rates could also imperil more banks and risk even more financial chaos. The Fed is playing with fire. Yes, they are. And you know who's gonna get burned? We are. And Dr. Reich goes on to lay out what the two objectives to deal with this financial conundrum are. The two objectives: fighting inflation by raising rates and avoiding a bank run are in direct conflict. In other words, one of these two things don't go together. As the old song goes, something's got to give. What will it be? The sensible thing would be for the Fed to pause rate hikes long enough to let the financial system calm down. Geniuses. Besides, inflation is receding, albeit slowly. So there's no reason to risk more financial tumult. I mean, that's it. Will they listen? God only knows, America. In the meantime, these policies are hurting everyday Americans. Dan, your thoughts?
The easiest way I can describe it in limited time without all the economic jargon is like the Fed is bringing a hammer to surgery. And it's a hammer from decades ago. It's like they only have one tool: pound in nails and nudge nails out. And what Robert Reich is saying, we need to go even beyond what he's saying. We need to think of the Fed and the American monetary system as a broader process for, sorry conservatives, controlling prices. Because when General Mills can say just today that our profits went up directly because of price hikes, that ain't inflation. Sure, there's costs that are slowly rising here and there, but that has nothing to do with prices of regular goods, like individual packs of yogurt going up by 50% of their regular price just from a couple of months ago, let alone eggs and everything else that's going on. Some of that's price, supply and demand. A lot of that is just corporate greed. We need to call that out. We need to address that. And guess what? Maybe we won't have so many inflationary pressures if the American people aren't spending so much and going into credit card debt to pay these things off.
Yeah, Dan, that is it. And again, where's the patriotism towards this moment in time we are in history? Making profit is one thing, but greed and gluttony is another. And that is really what we're facing. I mean, these businesses are raising their prices well beyond the cost of doing business. I mean, that's really what this comes, well beyond not only the cost of doing business, but also to make a profit. Again, it's all right to make a profit, but when your profit causes suffering to other people, to people, places, and things,
They're charging money in a bread line. Like think about that.
There it is, Dan. Charging money in the bread line. You better say that. Dan has said it. Now, in the black church, when the preacher has preached the sermon, baby, all we do is say amen, amen, and amen.